morning. You know, we did a round last week. It's a good thing we're not doing it again this week because we're a little bit tilted this way. This side seems to be the fuller side this morning. My name is Lorna. This is Vajra. We're happy to be here with you this morning. And welcome to those also who may be watching. Some of you may have noticed Bob in the back videoing. We're not streaming yet. We haven't gotten to that point where people can watch us live on the internet, but we are posting the services now online on our website. So there may be people who watch another time. This topic this morning is interesting. I looked up several different things to see what Yogananda had to say about truth. And what is truth? This title that we have for the reading, Does God Hide the Truth? And I've always read it, Does God hide the truth? And when I was reading it again this time, I looked at it differently, and my mind said, does God hide the truth? It certainly is hidden. We know that. It's not real clear to us all the time. But Yogananda says that truth, his definition of truth is interesting. He says, truth is that which gives us permanent happiness. That really intrigued me. Truth is that which gives us permanent happiness. So I thought, well, no wonder we get confused about the truth, because we're very confused about what gives us permanent happiness. There are just so many different ideas about what brings happiness and what gives us happiness that accounts for why there's so many different ideas about what is true and how to find that truth. So he says, anything that contradicts true happiness is untruth. And then the ultimate truth is God. God is the ultimate truth. So we know here in this room, we hear it every week, we study these teachings, we're searching in our hearts for what's true. We know that God has something to do with that, and that that's what we're reaching for. But the confusing part comes partly because there are so many different ideas of where happiness comes from and different concepts of how to get there. And we have a whole mixed up world here of all of these different levels of consciousness. I remember sitting, when I was in college, you only do this when you're in college, you sit up all night talking about things. And for me, at this particular moment, I was sitting on the roof of a car with a fellow nursing student. I was in nursing school here in Portland. And we had this all-night conversation about the nature of the universe and where is truth and what is truth and these things. This was before I found the path. And his argument was that, you know, all of this is just one big science experiment. Basically, it's all everything's random. It just, you know, the molecules got together at the right time and things just happened, and there's no real intelligence in the world. And I, of course, I was so sure, even though this was before I'd really found these teachings and this path, and I couldn't articulate it really well. I just remember being so passionate and saying, isn't it obvious? It's absolutely obvious there's more going on here, and there's something bigger than ourselves that's happening. It's not just us, and it's not just some random experiment. And any minute it can all go awry, or everything blow up, or everything end. There really is a power and a force greater than ourselves that's here. And to me, it was so clear. And to him, he wasn't there yet. And we find that, of course, all over the world, that there's all these different ideas all mixed up together. And we find now that we're in an age that Yogananda teaches. He teaches we're in an age of rising consciousness called Dwapara Yuga, rising Dwapara. So there's more and more awareness of what it is that's always been there. The idea of energy, the idea that things of magnetism, that things have light and energy, that there's things beyond the form. Those are ideas that are now not really foreign to people. And it's because the whole consciousness of the planet is shifting and changing. And it's not because those things are now suddenly appearing on the scene and they weren't here before. What we do is we realize, we just become more and more aware as we expand our sympathies, as we expand our understanding. We just become more and more aware of things that were already there. We say, oh, well, of course. Of course. One of the early experiences I had on the path once I started meditating was the sense of course, that's the way it is. That's the way it works. It's there. It's already there. And we're realizing it. That's why we call it the Church of, the name of this church is actually the Church of Self-Realization. It's realizing that higher self, that inner self, those truths that have already been there. But there's a difference also between what's facts and what's truth. Yogananda had a saying, or a teaching, aphorism, saying, we should learn to be calm amidst the crash of breaking worlds, which is quite a picture, to be able to be calm and still and centered amidst the crash of breaking worlds. There's another saying that didn't come from Yogananda. If you're calm, it means you don't have all the facts. And so there's a difference, we can gather all the facts, we can find out what's going on, we can make long lists of facts, and we can look at everything that's actually happening and get more and more panicked about what's going on. But that's not the truth. You can have the list of facts of what's happening, but then you can have the truth behind it. The reason that Yogananda says we can stand calm amidst the crash of breaking worlds is because even though that's all maybe very real and factual in our life, the truth behind that is there's nothing that can touch us. That our inner security is unshakable. But we have to know that. We have to get to the point where we actually understand that and feel that and experience that for ourselves. There's another example I thought of when I was studying yesterday about the difference between facts and truth. There's a story that Asha, one of our teachers who's in Palo Alto, she's the spiritual director of Palo Alto, she loves to tell about, I don't know if she was there or it was somebody else who told her, but years ago there was a Self-Realization Fellowship where they had a sort of a receiving line. They had some event and they had the monks there and they had visiting people, and one of the visitors was actually the daughter of the then President Ronald Reagan. What was her name? Patty? And she went down and in way of introducing herself to the monks that were there, she introduced herself, my name is Patty and my father is President of the United States. And without missing a beat, the monk said, nice to meet you. My father is Lord of the universe. And I always like that. There's, one was factual, one was the truth. And we have to, of course, live in the factual world. We have to operate where we are, and we have to learn to be truthful in a factual way also. If you introduce yourself all the time as, changeless, deathless, immortal spirit, it's a little hard to deal with with the reality of your work and your job and people. Even though if you hold that truth inside of you and you really identify with that, people are going to feel it and you're going to have an expansion of awareness. But you need to introduce yourself. Hello, I'm Lorna. Swami says in this. Swami said in this reading also that there's, in order to know God, he said, a willingness to seek the underlying reality behind appearances is essential for those who would know God. The underlying reality behind appearances. So we have the facts, we can see what's going on, and then if we want to know more, And that's the key, is a lot of people don't want to know more. They're not really looking for more than that, and that's fine. So you operate on the factual plane. But if you want to know more, you've got to be willing to go deeper than that. You've got to be willing to go to what's behind. And you've got to be willing to understand that the senses lie. You know, Yogananda says the only way we have of finding truth, or experiencing truth, is through our senses, in which case then we infer what's going on. And it's often untrue, isn't it? I had this really interesting experience recently where I was driving in the car and I was going out to our center out in Laurelwood, which is in Gaston, Oregon, about 20 minutes or so from here. And it was a beautiful summer day, and there was all this long grass growing on the side of the road. And I was driving behind a van, so it was much bigger than I was driving a little Honda. So this van was taller and bigger and was going in front of me. And the sun was, I don't know what direction that was, but it was over on my left, and so the shadows were going this way. So as we were driving, all of a sudden I noticed this phenomenon. The van was going along, and the shadow of the van, because the sun was going lower in the sky, there was a shadow of the van coming off the side. And the grass was moving and laying down as the van went by. It looked, to my eyes, to my senses, it looked like the shadow of the van. You know how you go along and you can do this as you walk along and you knock all the grass down, or you touch the fence as you walk along? What looked to me like the shadow was knocking the grass down as the van was driving. It was I just kept watching. I mean, this was for quite a ways down the road, so I kept watching this. I think, that is really weird. And I kept watching and trying to, get it straight in my mind that that's not possible. It can't happen. The shadow can't be moving the grass. But it looked like it was. And of course, what was really happening was the movement of the air. As the van was moving, there was a wake, of air that was causing that to happen. But my senses didn't know that. The little part of my mind that knows about this much about physics, realized that that's what was going on. But our senses can only give us so much information. And then we have to, our little brains try to figure that out from there, what's really going on. And a lot of times, it's wrong. Same thing is true, of relationships. You see, you talk to somebody and that somebody walks away from you, and then you hear them laughing as they walk away, and you don't exactly hear what they say, Oh, are they laughing at me? Are they laughing at something I said? Are they laughing at, And our senses just don't have what it takes to give us the real truth. The only way that we can actually find the real truth and have that experience is through intuition. Intuition, Yogananda describes as being direct perception of truth. And we all have intuition, we all have that ability. Some of us have it stronger than others, but we all have moments where we perceive something, we have an intuitive knowledge, an intuitive experience of what is really true. And it's not based on anything that you can document or say, I learned this through the senses. But how do you develop intuition? If you really want to know what's true, for some it's just fun. Sometimes, I get intuitive glimpses. But if you want to know God, if you really want to know what's true, what's really behind this little drama that we have all the time, you've got to develop your intuition. You've got to nurture that within you, and you've got to help it to grow and become another sense that you can use. And the way you do that is through meditation. There's no other way. You have to turn the senses off. Otherwise, the senses are the ones that are talking all the time. You can't shut them out. But only through meditation, sitting down and being still and being quiet, turning off the sense telephones, Yogananda used to call them. He came at a time to the United States in the 1920s, all through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and into the 50s of that time when we had this huge explosion of technology and all of these things coming on the scene. And when he arrived in 1920, not everybody had telephones. They were around, but it was still common for people not to have them. And so he would use these metaphors So we turn off the sense telephones, and then we can listen, and then we can tap into that silence within. Because truth comes from stillness. Truth comes from where, before that vibration happened. Creation came from that utter stillness, and then things started vibrating. And that's what causes all this confusion, is everything's vibrating in different rates, everything's happening out here, and so we can't see it. By being still and meditating and going more calmly within, without the senses telling us what's going on, then we can get to the truth. Then we can really have that direct experience. The idea of being connected in truth is interesting. That's where. Let me back up. There's a phrase that a lot of people use these days, at least people I talk to, outside of Ananda, my truth. They'll say, well, I have to hold on to my truth. This is my truth. And I was really puzzled with that when I first started hearing it. It's not really wrong. We all have our own perception of what's going on, and we have to be strong enough within ourselves to trust what it is that we think is happening, and what that truth is. But Yogananda explains that there's relative truth. There's the idea of all of us having a different perception. He gave the example of 3 people getting together to find a solution to a problem, and each person might have a very valid and workable solution. And each one might be true in the sense that it's possible and that it works and that it will succeed. But it's relative to other realities. It's relative to the situation and what's happening. It's not an eternal truth. It's not an ultimate truth. So when we get to that reality behind everything, when we get to that absolute truth, then there's no my truth, your truth. It's all one. It's all one. When we hear in the reading every week, we start with, truth is one. What is it? How do we start it? Truth is one and eternal. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. It's one and eternal. And it doesn't matter which church you go to or what you believe in the sense of how this world works or which teacher you have. Once you get to that absolute truth, truth is one and eternal. The other thing that happens beyond this idea of my truth. Melissa, can I ask a question? Can you turn on more cool air? It's getting. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but these lights are really hot. The other thing that Swami Kriyananda is the direct disciple of Yogananda, and one of the things he often has cautioned us about is this idea that God is within and that this truth is inside of us, and we can go into meditation and we can experience that, is great. But we get into sort of dangerous territory, or there's a misunderstanding sometimes when people start believing that everything that you need is all inside. I have this experience with writing. I've had a job writing curriculum and working with a Christian group that are more, they call themselves progressive Christians, or more progressive thinkers. And also a lot of other people in New Thought churches and other places where there's this idea that, well, God is within me, everything's inside. I've actually had people tell me, why do I even need to pray? I don't really need, if it's all within me, if I have that within me, if I'm divine, if I'm a divine spirit, I should be able to just relate to God inside, and I don't need to pray, or I don't need to worry about what's going on out here. I have it all inside here. And it's tricky, it's a slippery slope, because it's true that we're all connected. We have that one eternal truth within us, and we can tap into that. We can be still and we can find that within. But our affirmation this morning that Vajra read is about self-expansion. If all you do is go inside, you can also get more and more fooled. Partly because you have more than one voice in there. Have you guys noticed that? I go inside. There's lots of little voices in there vying for my attention and trying to convince me, what's true or what's not true, or you really should do this or you really should do that. So we have a lot of mental citizens, is what Yogananda called them, little mental citizens in there. And depending on the mood, depending on what's going on, there's some have louder voices than others, and some you're going to listen to. So having a relationship outwardly with other devotees, with other truth seekers, that's another neat word, isn't it? Truth seekers. We're all seeking that truth. Having a relationship outwardly and having some confirmation in an outer way also helps us to find that truth and keep on the right path. But it's also true that we're not the container. We don't have it all in here. We come from one source so that it's within us. Our reality, our identity is linked to that. We're part of that divine reality. And we're all the same in terms of how much of that is accessible to us. We all have that within us. Every part of creation is from that one source, and every part of creation has that within them. And Yogananda also says we're never going to have more. It's not that we're gathering more and getting more and more of that divine truth. All we're doing is peeling away layers and looking at it more clearly and getting more and more clear about what's there. So having a relationship with God in an outward way through our friends, through our devotees, through everything that life offers us is also important. That self-expansion, that awareness of God that is without as well as within. It's both directions. If we define ourselves in such a small way here and say it's all inside here, what we've done is, again, it's not an expansive thought, it's a contractive thought. It's a definition that's too small. And that line from the Gita that was in the reading, that God is not provable, is a little awe-inspiring to me. God is not provable. We need to continue to be humble and remember that there's so much more happening. There's so much more that we can't grasp and hold on to in our little minds and in our little intellects and try to figure it all out. We need to continue to be able to expand and open and experience more and more and more. Because this is what truth looks like. These guys up here, they're walking, talking, living truth. Nothing is in the way. Everything they say, everything they do, every thought, every energy, every vibration they put out is truth, is pure and unclouded. That's what it looks like. So we have to continue to expand and know that that can be us too, that we can get there, but we have to be willing and open to be humble and realize that there's a lot going on that we still don't have a handle on. The idea in the reading today, in the Bhagavad Gita, the reading said, "In me are all existences contained, not I in them." We have to remember that we're within the divine. It's not all just in here. That we're within and God is without. Catherine of Genoa, who was a saint in the 15th century, I think. She said, she was quite a mystic and wrote a lot about her experiences. And she said, "I'm so washed in the tide of his measureless love that I seem to be below the surface of the sea and cannot touch or see or feel anything around me except its water." That we're within that all the time. I'm just going to take that thought I have a reading from Whispers from Eternity, which is a book of prayer demands and poems from Yogananda that are all inspiring and deep and wonderful. This one is called The Cosmic Salutation. O Spirit, I bow to Thee in front of me, behind me, on the left and on the right. I bow to Thee above and beneath. I bow to Thee all around me. I bow to Thee within and without. I bow to Thee everywhere, for Thou art everywhere. Let's take just a moment with that thought of truth and God being everywhere, within and without. And we have another beautiful song to share with you this morning.